Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Choose Inclusion for our Black Voices Matter series. I am here as usual with my co-hosts Mike and Yubi. Hey guys.
Hey everybody,
Hey,
welcome back.
welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. Got a great guest.
Yeah, we're super excited about this. And once Mike heard about one of their titles, Mike got a little excited. But today we have Patrice Palmer. Their pronouns are they, them, theirs. Patrice is the CEO of eRoot, also teaches at CSU, Colorado State University. And the thing that got Mike super excited is that Patrice actually works at New Belgium Brewery as their diversity and inclusion specialist. So welcome, Patrice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So the first question we always ask our guests is just a check-in. How are you doing?
It's a lot going on in the world. And every day is a struggle, and to be very transparent, you don't get to be authentic. I don't think authenticity is something that when you have intersecting identities, you honestly get to be. Because I think if I was completely authentic in how I feel most days, people just wouldn't want to hear it, honestly. So with that, you nod and you say, I'm fine, while trying to just get through the rest of the day. But today, I will say today's a little bit better than it was yesterday. And I expect that tomorrow will be better than today. So I'm going to keep it moving.
So, I mean, you kind of mentioned that, you're at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities. You're Black, queer, and trans, non-binary. How does that impact your day-to-day life and the work that you're doing?
It's interesting to see how you sometimes don't have a choice of how you get to show up. You show up for your audience. I think Miss RuPaul said it best. Everything is drag. Whatever you come into a space, depending on the audience, you may have to dress up a little bit. So having intersecting identities, it's sometimes very hard for folks to have an understanding that my Blackness is as much hurt as my queer identity, which is as much hurt as my trans identity. I think it's just hard for folks to understand the simultaneity of that. And so because of code switching, you switch as it relates to that room. And so I very rarely get to come in as my whole self. And so that can just be tiresome and cumbersome, to have to switch off and code switch as much as you have to, depending on what space you're in.
Patrice, this is Mike, and I'm fascinated with this conversation because, yes, I think it's fantastic that you're part of a great brewing company here in Colorado. However, again, you teach at a very prestigious university here in Colorado as well. So you wear some very public facing hats.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to as you're talking about this, showing up as your authentic self, you're still getting paid by some pretty large entities to show up. So I'd love to know, so what is that? Talk to me a little bit more about that journey. How do you walk that? Put me, give me again, being a blind guy, I'm white blind guy, I'm missing out on some of this. Can you put me in your shoes, per se, for some of that journey? Would you indulge me with that?
Absolutely. So many different things. So my journey has always been that the best way for me to show up has always been for me to be unapologetic. And that's really, really hard when you're in a forward-facing space, because everything you say is scrutinized and criticized. And so you want to make sure you choose your words carefully without taking away from the levity or the brevity of what is going on in the moment. And so I have had the honor and privilege of working in spaces that for some odd reason allow me to speak my truth. I don't know if they know what they've done, but it has absolutely given me opportunities to be visible and be able to speak my truth in a multitude of settings. So at CSU, teaching in the College of Business, which is also just an interesting space to be in a business setting, as well as doing large scale diversity and inclusion programming within the college and working with advisees within the college. I've really had a chance to be able to be unapologetic in how I show up. I think anytime I've ever interviewed for a job, I said, is this what you really want? Because I'm not turning this off. I will do what is asked of me, but I'm going to tell you in a way that is both with grace, but also with accountability, who I am, what I represent, and what needs to happen. And in both of those spaces, I have been honored to be able to do that. And it hasn't caught up with me yet. So we're going to keep knocking on wood that I don't face any backlash. But in those two institutions, I have definitely had a opportunity to be my whole self. I have, however, been in institutions where I could not be. I was questioned about who I am, the message that I was presenting to students, or I was giving to clients, too rough, too angry, too whatever. And honestly, yeah, when you are faced with injustice, as a human being, I have every right to be angry. And I'm going to be angry, and I'm going to tell you that I'm angry. But I'm also, because I'm an educator by trade, I'm going to also show you how to not step in it again, so we don't have to keep going over the same bridge. And so with that, I try my best to show up as authentically as I can, also knowing my parameters and my boundaries. So in painting a picture for you, when I show up, I'm showing up as Patrice. I'm showing up as non-binary. I'm telling you that these are my pronouns. I'm engaging in my Blackness by the way that I talk and the way that I show up in every aspect. And for me, my Blackness is royalty. It has a commanding presence to it. And so when I come in, I never come in a space where I feel like I have to be subservient or I have to wait to be seen or heard. I come in proud, I come in strong, because that's who I am and that's who I descend from. And then being queer and non-binary, transgender, I'm magic on top of that. So Mike, I'm pretty awesome without saying.
Yes, all day long. And
All day long. Love it.
but how, like, I would say that I think for most people in general, that feeling is rare.
Mm.
And so, what do you say to people who aren't there, right?
Mhm.
How do they build that level of confidence and just pure, like you said, unapologetic authenticity? Like, this is my identity, this is me.
Mm. Yeah, I would definitely say the first thing you have to do is you have to stop being afraid of your reflection. Um, Mike, I will honestly say that saying that you're blind, you get to, in so many ways, your reflection is what you've created for yourself. And I think we have to get to that point, because what society has given us is not an accurate representation of who we are. It's one of those fun mirrors in a circus. It's a distortion of who we are. So the first thing we have to do is recognize that the image that we've been given is not us. It's a caricature of us. The next thing is that you have to find unapologetic people. You have to find community members who love who they are, who are strong in who they are, because the world is cruel, especially with intersecting identities. I don't fit in. And it's hard to say that when you're 12 and 16 and 20, that you don't fit in when everybody is showing you that that's what you have to be. I don't fit in. And I had to be okay with the fact that I will never fit in. And that's hard because, but it's a you commandment. It's a you commitment. It's all up to you to be able to do that. And you have to be able to surround yourself with people that also see that beauty in you. For me, I don't look at myself in a mirror, but the people that I surround myself with are my mirror. They mirror who I am, the beauty that I have, the love and the dedication and the strong work ethic. All those people that are in my inner circle are that reflection of who I truly am. And so, what I would say to anyone as they are trying to find themselves is you're going to have to be comfortable with being by yourself. And I heard a great communications professor say that they've never been able to be the only woman in a space because they're always the only Black person in the space. So they had to be okay with being Black so that they can show up as a Black woman. And that's what I say, the same thing. You actually have to be okay with not being a part of what other people's definition of you will be and is. And so I'm excited that it took me a while. It didn't happen overnight. I'm 37 years old and it didn't happen overnight, but it has happened to a point where I am on fire for who I am. And I count it an honor and a privilege to be around people who appreciate it and celebrate it, but also hold me to the fire when it comes to accountability.
I just want to cheer while you're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bravo. Yeah, bravo.
Absolutely. So Patrice, one of the things that we talked about, a week ago was really around the Black Lives Matter movement, the fact that it's gotten so much, publicity, momentum, a lot of coverage in the media, but there's a key voice that's been missing from this conversation, and that's the voice of Black trans women. I was wondering if you could talk about that, like what's happening and what needs to change.
It's so layered, it's so nuanced. It's steeped in supremacy in so many different ways, steeped in misogyny and patriarchy and all these other isms that push us out and other us. So the first thing I would say is in order to love Black and love Blackness and love Black lives and love the voices that Black lives bring to society, you have to love all of our Blackness. All of our Blackness is nuance. We are not a monolith. We are a nuanced people with language and food and culture and different experiences that have completely joined us together through the melanation of our skin and the enslavement of being here in North America. And so all of those things together make Black culture this great melting pot of so many different cultures and identities all together. So when we have movements that, again, were started by Black queer folks, you have Bayard Rustin. We would not have gotten to the March on Washington without Bayard Rustin. We wouldn't have understood the beauty of our language and our authenticity without James Baldwin and Audre Lorde and these beautiful queer symbols of hope and triumph. And while also having the women like Marsha P. Johnson and Miss Major, these women of trans experience who are Black, who stand in their Blackness, who stand in their womanhood and stand in their trans identity and don't take any of that for granted. You cannot see all of us if you don't shed the light on how trans women have shaped our community and continue to shape our community, continue to be that voice within our community, right? And so I feel that as a movement, we do Black women a disservice, and even more, we do Black women who are of trans experience a disservice when we do not center them as the most marginalized and the folks that we need to pay attention to. And so that is something that I have seen within the movement, is that we don't get to center those lived experiences and really see the fringes of society in some ways, how a lot of Black trans women have had to survive. And then we don't get to hear about them until they die. And even in that death is fleeting because they have lived as one thing, but they are still named as what society wants them to be. I've gotten to a point within myself as I talk around Blackness, as I talk around my queer and trans identity, that if I do not pay homage to Black trans women, then I am doing my Blackness a disservice. I am doing my queer identity a disservice. I am doing my trans identity a disservice, because I cannot call myself a part of a movement that does not center and love and celebrate the uniqueness of all of me. That unapologetic nature, we got that from trans women. We got that unapologetic understanding of what it meant, because Black women in totality have always had the movement on their backs. And as someone who was assigned female at birth, who has travailed societally as a Black woman, even as a non-binary person, I would never disrespect my journey in saying that a part of who I am was shaped by the experiences that I had as a Black woman growing up. And now, as someone who's been able to come into my truth even more as a non-binary person, that Blackness still shows up, that Black womanhood still shows up. And so, yes, I pay homage and I pay respect to the women who live, and the women whose shoulders that we stand on, whose we absolutely stand on the blood, sweat, and tears of women, particularly Black trans women. And we just have to acknowledge it in order for us to be able to continue to move forward with the veracity that we're moving.
That's amazing. What you said is, and I hope people are listening to what you said, because to me, it's these Black trans women, they're the strongest of anybody.
Mm.
Right? Like I mean, at least that's how I see it, because they are unapologetic and real, like they know who they are, and they are fighting for that more than anybody else. And that should absolutely be like at the top of the conversation. And I just hope people can hear that in your voice, that these are people, and they're the strongest of us.
And the beauty of that is the fact that they're so strong, and they're so loving, and they're so compassionate, that even when we hurt them, they have never left us. They continue to fight alongside of us. They continue to validate us. They continue to lift us up when we have forgotten them. They never step back. They never stop doing what they do, because they know that this is what needs to happen. And so within that, it's like how can we not stop and give homage, pay homage, when someone is like, I know you're spitting on my name, but I still love you. I know that you're killing me, but I still want you to succeed. That strength is what keeps us together. And until we acknowledge it in its totality, we will never be as strong as we should be. We're only as strong as we are because they hold us up. The minute we begin to actually embrace and allow us to step back and hold them up, oh, we about damage. We're gonna really do some damage because now it's all in. We're not divided anymore. It's not, oh, okay, because you fit this particular spectrum, we're gonna move forward. Now it's all of us, from the strongest to the most afraid. Once we all connect, that's where love is, and that's that promised land that I want to get to.
So what do we need to be doing to center Black trans women's voices and center our conversations around that? What should organizations be doing? What should individuals be doing? What should society be doing? What should the media be doing?
Absolutely. The first thing is listening. Black trans women have been talking for a generation. Marsha P. Johnson, as we know it as Stonewall, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Riviera are the two women who literally were a part of actually creating the Stonewall uprising. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't even be able to celebrate and embrace all these different parts of ourselves and be able to show up in these places authentically. We would not have been able to do that. We would not have seen a rise in Black gay men who are able to talk about their profession as drag performers. We wouldn't know what that is. You wouldn't see that on main screen if the women who didn't fit in weren't fighting to be seen. So the first thing is acknowledging them and giving them their rightful place back in history, because we literally took them out of history. We need to first center them back into history so that we understand the sacrifice. The second is we need to get rid of our antiquated ways of thinking about how womanhood needs to show up. When you oppress trans women, you are also oppressing cis women, because if you do not allow trans women to show up and be themselves, you are ultimately telling women they can also not show up and be themselves if they identify as cis, if they identify as disabled, if they identify as overweight, or any other explicative that I can put with that. You are telling them they can't be if you also tell trans women they cannot be. So that's the next thing, is that we cannot continue to silence women, particularly trans women, because when we silence them, we're silencing everyone. We're silencing communities in totality. And then the third thing I would definitely say is, now that you're listening, you've put them back into history, actually let them speak their own truth. I appreciate being in this space. I appreciate the love that this podcast is giving, but I also want to hear Black trans women speak about Black trans women. Allow them to speak, allow them to tell their own stories, so that you can actually see all of the nuances and the experiences that show up within them and within the communities that they represent. And so that would be the things that I would want within our movement, and also within society. Until we are respectful of trans women, we're not going to be respectful of women. We're not going to be respectful of non-binary, masculine presenting folks, folks who identify as gay, as lesbian. You won't be able to actually love us in totality until you love the one that you silence the most. And so that's what I am wanting us to do as a society, as a Black community, to remember trans identity is absolutely not a foreign concept to the African diaspora. It's not. Each community, each tribe had its own way of doing things, but through colonized religion, through enslavement. We have been taught that it is wrong, and that because it is wrong, then we must exterminate it. And because of that, now in 2020, 21 Black trans women have been murdered within the last week and a half. I'm sorry, not week and a half, a month and a half, since the end of June, going into July. We've lost 6 women, brutally, brutally lost. And let me go back and say, I want to make sure I get my statistic right. There has not been 21 Black women. There have been 21 trans deaths, and the vast majority of those people have been Black trans women. So I want to make sure I get that correct. But it makes no sense. And most of them have been murdered, and then they have been misgendered, and then they have been buried incorrectly because of our fear as a society. And I'm tired of it. I'm angered by it, and my heart grieves because there's so much more that needs to be done in order to make Black women safe, Black trans women safe. And we're just not doing it, and we're not centering it in the conversation. And I have no idea why it's this hard not to do. I don't understand.
Absolutely.
Patrice,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Nina. I'm blown away with the with these hate crimes. Like I I'll be the first to admit I don't follow mainstream media. I don't I don't stick my head in the sand, but I really do my best because of so much negativity that's just in the news in general. But this is the kind of statistic though that I'm actually really surprised that I haven't heard of from some of my other alternative media modes, and I'm blown away with this hate crime. Are these hate crimes? Are they being solved for? Are they like are they just going unsolved? Like
Yeah.
I'm just
So some of them are unsolved. Some of them are unsolved. Some of them are, we know exactly who the perpetrator was, and we know the reasoning behind the crime. And it goes into that myth, and I definitely want to say myth, that trans women, particularly trans women, do not disclose anything about themselves when they meet a potential partner. And so a lot of the deaths have been around the anger and fury of knowing who this person is. And honestly, to be very transparent in this, it's the attraction. And because of how society labels that attraction as abnormal, that person now feels as though they have to eliminate and exterminate that feeling by ending a woman's life. Right now, I think Brayla Stone right now is the youngest Black trans woman who was murdered, and she was 17. She was in high school. She was 17, and there were 3 or 4 assailants in her crime. Um, and so it, regardless of of how it comes about, the taking of Black trans women's lives is just appalling, and it has to be more mainstream than it is. HRC is reporting on it. The Transgender Justice Initiative is reporting on it. But a lot of people, the vast majority of folks, still don't know who these folks are, and don't know who I am. And I want to center Black trans women, but also say we as a community are not doing enough to even get to know, to provide sanctuary, and to provide an outlet for these women to be safe because that is something that we still are not doing. As it was said before, Nina, I believe you mentioned the high rate of unemployment for trans people collectively. We also have the highest rates of discrimination as it relates to sexual harassment in the workplace. A lot of us don't want to work in a workplace that people are asking you continuously about your genitals, or asking you or making derogatory remarks about you. And so we have this very high rate of assault and battery and discrimination, because the world still won't see us as human. And as a Black person, I understand not being seen as human, and then it regurgitates itself within other communities that I'm a part of, particularly the Black trans community.
Patrice, I think I'm so glad you joined us today, because clearly this is a topic that is not talked about enough. I mean, the media is not covering it. These voices are not being centered, and I really appreciate you calling us out to make sure that we are bringing in Black trans women into our podcast as well. And so I do appreciate that, and I think that we should do that. And so I will ask you and our listeners to give us recommendations if there's any folks that you know, and then obviously we will also do our due diligence to find Black trans women who might want to be heard, and give them the platform to do that. So thank you for this, and thank you for everything. We really appreciate you taking the time and space to join us today, and to give so much information to our listeners to hopefully get some action coming out of this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Definitely have recommendations. Would love to hopefully know that your listeners are also doing the exact same thing. But also want to kind of highlight a couple of organizations who are doing the work, because again, Black trans lives are always looked at only in death, but understand that there is joy in us, there is love in us, there is life in us. And so there are a lot of different organizations who are bringing that life and love to Black trans people, as well as centering Black trans voices, particularly those who identify as women, and also most certainly we haven't even gotten into the silencing of Black trans men and how that has showed up. And so again, I think even with that, having Black trans men in the space speaking their truths and being able to say, this is who I am and this is how I'm showed up. As a Black trans person who identifies as non-binary, my biggest fear is that I will be killed because I present as a man, but I will be buried as a woman. And therefore my story won't be told, because they will never know who I was, because of how society has blanketed me. And so there are, like I said, a lot of different community groups that are doing some absolutely great work. Black Trans Circle is a great organization that's doing work with Black trans women. Transgender Awareness Alliance of South Carolina is doing some great work for Black trans people in the South, because again, that's a whole nother conversation to talk about what they're doing in the South, and how access is absolutely denied. Trans Women of Color Project and the Trans Justice Funding Project is another great project that again centers women who are in the Midwest around getting resources that are basic resources that are just needed, that you may not be able to find. And then we have BTAC, which is the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition, that really just does so much around Black joy, pageantry, speaking engagements, community service outlets, and just a lot of really great things. And then again, around Black joy, Greek letter organizations that have been created to talk around Black identity, Black trans identity in the fraternal or sorority type space, also are popping up to provide Black joy. Because again, our narrative has always been so bleak. The average lifespan of a Black trans woman is no more than 35. So if you can meet a Black trans woman over the age of 35, wow. And just to know, like, I used to be 35, I'm 37 years old. If I identify as a Black trans woman, there would be no way that I can make it to 35. And that's a known fact. So
Right.
creating these spaces that have Black joy, Black trans women joy, is also a big part of keeping Black women engaged and keeping Black women a part of society, and stopping the othering, because Black joy is just as strong and needed as any other opportunity, because it's so hard just existing in spaces that don't want you. And to be unapologetic, you got to have love. And so I am very happy for the communities that I am a part of that give me that love, because they give me life.
Yeah, and they keep you alive, and
They
that's
keep you alive, and they won't forget you.
right. Well, I hope everybody comes back and listens to this episode over and over, because you're an amazing voice, and powerful, and it's needed, and we're going to do what we can to keep bringing voices like yours through our platform. So thank you again, Patrice. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, chooseinclusion.com. You can find all of these amazing voices. Just go and learn, listen and learn. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Mike. And we will see you all next time.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Thanks,
Have a good
Patrice.
one. Thank you so much.